And welcome to Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres, episode 266. Today is a feedback session. We've had a couple of people send in their images for feedback and critique, so that's what we're going to be looking at. Meanwhile, we're here live, so if you're watching live, then leave a comment down below, in the chat part, and let me know where you're from, let me know what you're up to, and we can make a start. So yes, and welcome to Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres, episode 266. So yes, today is a feedback session. So it's all about, we've had April and Nicola have both sent in images. So we're going to be talking a little bit about, April's picture is about tilt shift, stuff that we were talking about last week. Kind of taking this a step further, or to sort of see how she can apply some of the things we learnt during that podcast. And Nicola is put in an image where, amongst other things, we'll be talking about the notion of lens flare. So stick around, lots coming up. Meanwhile, like I say, if you happen to be watching live, then leave a comment. If you're not watching live, you can still leave a comment. Just if you make mention of anything that happens to be in these podcasts, then let me know what you're mentioning it about, because there isn't a timestamp in the general comments. So I'll never be entirely sure what it is you're mentioning. So in the meantime, I see we have a couple of people in already. April says, greetings from a sunny Long Island, New York. Nadia joins us from a dull but damp Fife. And John says hello, all from mid-Ohio. It's cold here. And Lisa joins us from a sunny Maryland. Okay, so we've got a kind of full range of bits and bit of weather happening around the place. So, right now, the more observant of you, I will just make a mention of this just right now, is I've kind of changed this bit over here. I'll get rid of it in a moment. But what I wanted to draw your attention to is this bit here, the submit photos to. So basically, if you want to submit your photos now for critique, feedback, or for any of the challenges, I mean, you can do the usual ways. We still have the Facebook group and the Flickr group, although to be honest, the Flickr group I think just seems to be this lone desert where nothing really happens apart from me updating Smug Points. But you can place it in either of the groups, or you can email me directly. But I've set up a new email thing, kimairespodcast@gmail.com, and that's just to kind of make it a little bit easier. My normal Gmail account is filling up and all the rest of it, so I figured it'd be quite good to have a dedicated email address specifically for these podcasts. So if you're wanting to send me an image for feedback, if you're wanting to enter an image into the challenges, then the best place for me, at any rate, is if you can put them in the kimairespodcast@gmail.com. So I'll flash this up again at the end periodically. So yeah, keep an eye out, try and make a note of that somewhere. But, you know, well, also make mention of it on the Facebook group as well. Yes, so in terms of quick Smug Points update, I think. So Smug Points are currently, where are we, sitting at for the month of, I'll tell you what, let's just let's swap that out for the moment then. So so Smug Points are currently sitting at, for November, Nicola is in the lead with 35 Smug Points, Robert is in second place with 30 Smug Points, and everybody else is on 15, 10 or 5 depending on whether you've made any comments or not. Marilyn joins us from sunny Colorado. Welcome, Marilyn. So yes, Smug Points. So you get the Smug Points for the amount of input that you have to these podcasts. So by leaving a comment here, you'll get 5 Smug Points. In the case of Nicola and April, this week they will both get 25 bonus Smug Points for submitting an image for feedback. And it's part of that is because, well, you're here watching about the feedback that I give them. Because when I give feedback, it's not just the person who gains from it, it's everybody else who's watching who goes, oh, right, okay, now I see how that applies to some of my photos too. So always worth sending in your images for feedback. And then next week we have the November challenge. So again, I'll be talking a little bit more about that later. Stick around for that. But that's your chance to send in your images. and get all sorts of, well, you get 10 bonus points for sending in an image, and then there will be extra bonus points for my favourite and the crowd favourite. But yes, just a quick reminder on that then. But if you are sending in your images for your challenge next week, and I'll say it again, but this new email address, Kim Ayres Podcast, just remember how to spell Kim and Ayres, but it's if you're not sure, scroll down, Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres. Everything is spelt here on the YouTube channel, right? But Kim Ayres Podcast at gmail.com will be where to do it, to send images from now on. I mean, like I say, I will take them the usual channels and what have you, but by and large, I'd like you to, as and when you remember, to shift over to the new way of doing it. Oh, Nicola joins us as well and says, hello, Kim, and everybody. Welcome, Nicola. Right, so where are we at? Okay, let me just do a little bit of tidy my desktop about here so that I can then flip back over here, and I then have a better idea of what's going on. I can still read your comments here, and I've now got the desktop how I want it laid out. So some of the more observant of you as well may have noticed that I'm now lit from the other side. Rather than being lit by the window, I'm now being lit by a light over there. That's because winter has finally come. I mean, it's so dull and dark outside. It's a wet, dreary day here in Castle Douglas. There's just not enough light coming through the window now. And by the time we get to the end of this, it will be so dark, I'll just be lit by the screens. So now we're into kind of winter settings for the next couple of months, I think, until the sun decides to reappear on a Sunday afternoon. So yes, what we're doing today then is a feedback session. So this is the opportunity for you to send in your images and get direct feedback from a professional photographer, and to help you kind of get to points whereby maybe you've got a bit stuck and you're not, or you know, whatever it is, whether you're looking for editing help or help on what you might have done differently with your camera settings at the time, or even maybe sometimes there's images where if you just stood 2 steps to the left, it might have cleared something on the horizon for something going on in the background. How to express the narrative. Ultimately, every time we bring the camera up, we stick it to our eye, there's an idea that we've got, something we want to communicate, and how successfully we communicate that is really kind of what photography is all about. If we communicate it brilliantly, then hey, we've done it, people love the photo. If it hasn't really communicated as well as we wanted it to, then everybody's kind of left a bit not so sure about it. So, but with our own images, we kind of have our blind spots. We're not always clear whether what we're trying to communicate is being received in the way we're trying to express it. And that's where professional pair of eyes can really help. So today then, what we're going to do, like I said, we've had imaging from April. Let's start with April. Okay, so what I will do is April sent in, let me just click over to here, and she sent in this image here, which, as you can see, is harking back to our tilt shift idea that we were talking about last week. And April says, where are we? April says, I tried to find a photo that would work in the tilt shift effect, and it was almost impossible. This shot was the best I could do. I've done it in Adobe Elements, tilt shift effect application. Many photos just didn't cut it. And this is true. There is one of these problems. The tilt shift effect does have a little bit of a problem with trying to kind of create... Oh, hold on a sec. Let me just... Where am I? Ah, no, sorry. This one. This is me getting all mixed up here. This is... Sorry, that other one was me playing around with it, and I don't know why. I seem to have saved it. But, right, let me delete that. I was just going to confuse matters. Okay, sorry. This one, then, is April's tilt shift image. So what she's done, she's taken, and it's not a bad start. It really isn't a bad start, and it's kind of got what you want to with a tilt shift image. In that, you've got depth, and the things that are further away are higher up the photo. The things that are closer are lower down in the photo. You've got you've got little objects that you can kind of place around, and so when we're trying to create this toy model type effect that the tilt shift gives us, this is a good starting point. And generally speaking, if you're at a sort of anything from a sort of 25, 30 up to about a 45-degree angle, then that's a good starting point, as it tends to allow you to blur in and out of it. So this was her starting point, and we're kind of there, but it's not necessarily working. At a smaller size, it sort of looks slightly more convincing. The bigger you go, the less convincing it looks. So let's just open this in Photoshop and see what we've actually got here. So this is our image, and what we do, if we zoom in a bit, we can see that it's getting blurred as it goes further up and less blurred in the middle, and it doesn't work when we zoom in. When we sort of zoom out and make it small, it starts to have slightly more effect. But ultimately, what we're trying to look at here is the notion of a narrow depth of field. And I think in this case, the depth of field just doesn't quite feel narrow enough to really make it work. Now, there's a couple of different ways you can make it work. So what we do is, if we duplicate the layer, I'll filter and go to blur, Gaussian or Gaussian blur, depending on, now obviously I want it that blurred, bring it back down and maybe blur it up a little bit more than it already is. And then what we do is we mask it, and I'll go to gradient, and I'll pick this gradient here, so that when I go like that, now we've already got a blur underneath it, and what I'm going to do is kind of take that blur there, and then I can move it around a little bit and try and decide, do we focus it on this car at the front? Do we focus it on the car further back? Now, we can't focus it on cars right at the back because they're already blurred. And part of this problem here is just trying to find the right spot. And to be honest, I think the sweet spot is actually about here, where there isn't a car, unfortunately. So we can do that, and we've blurred it a little bit more, and maybe it looks a little bit, but what I'll do, I'll move in this, I'll use the other way of doing it, which is to go into Camera Raw filter and go to lens blur. I click apply, and then this is just going to sort of work its way around, and then it gives us this notion of focus range, and we can create depth blur. So I can really pull that in, make it even blurry. We can increase the blur amount, and then what I can do is I can move this back and forth a bit, and what I'll try and do is focus on this little car in the front here, or maybe I try and focus, it almost works better on those little cars at the back there. But this is the tricky part, because ultimately, April, I tend to feel that what you really needed was your car about here. Sort of in between these two would have been ideal. We can see that it seems to be working best. These two little cars over here are starting to look quite toy-like in that sense. This one's just about getting there. Maybe if I just push that back a little bit and take it to there. But now I kind of want to increase that blur. I want to narrow that a little bit more. The problem is, the further back we go, the less depth we actually have. So there's not a lot of room. And we kind of want this front one here, except for the fact it's maybe too far forward. But yeah, kind of, it's a tricky one. So we'll kind of go to there, and now we've got those. This is part of the problem. But so I'll tell you what I'm going to do for the sake of this. I'm just going to pull this back a little bit, and I'm going to try and get these two little cars over here, because that's really where it seems to work best. Now when I click OK, what I'm going to do is I'm going to recrop this. I'm going to pull this in over here like that. And I think now what happens is, because we've got these bits of car in focus, that it feels like it's working a little bit better. But like I say, ideally, because you are on the right, you're looking out on the right side of the road here, you'd needed that car a little bit further. But there's a second bit here that I really want to talk about, which I want to mention, which I noticed while playing around, and some of you may have noticed in the last image, was that the other image that I had when I was playing around before was brighter. So if I duplicate this layer, and there's something about, if you're looking at the idea of creating like a toy model, then sometimes what you want to do is you want to kind of actually brighten it and sort of play with the contrast and boost the colours, because models are very often painted just a little bit brighter than real life. So if I go back into Camera Raw filter for the moment, and I go to the light, and let's boost the contrast and make it a bit brighter, but boost that contrast a little bit more. Maybe even, now there's not a lot of colour in this, all the cars seem to be black and grey, so I don't know whether there'll be a lot, but I'll just boost that vibrance a little bit as well, like that. And now, you see, we've gone from that to that. And in a lot of ways, I feel that that makes it look even more model-like. Okay, so that whole kind of tilt-shift effect then is happening. So first of all, your main problem there, April, well, in essence, you had three problems with your tilt-shift image. The first was essentially the right car in the right place. You just needed one a fraction further forward, and then it would, honestly, the whole thing would have locked in a little bit closer, a little bit better. So if you'd got that, that would have helped. The second thing was you needed a narrower depth of field. Okay, the effect that you used in Adobe Elements. Now I don't have that one, so I can't comment on it directly. But you needed to have a narrower depth of field, and that really helps draw it in. But the third thing, and I really should have mentioned this in the tilt shift episode last week, but I wasn't overly thinking about it, is this idea of boosting the saturation and the kind of contrast on it. I'll tell you what, let me show you another one just to kind of get that point across, April, which is let me open remember this one. This was one I was using before. So here we have this picture of Brixham Harbour, and by the time we get to this point, I've already done the tilt shift. So we've got the blurring out, and it's got this sort of slight little toy town model village kind of idea to it. But what I want to do is I'll duplicate that layer, and that's again. So I'm now going to go into Camera Raw, and what I want to do is go to the light and boost the contrast, okay? Maybe even up the exposure a little bit. Certainly boost that contrast. Now I know we're getting a few little blown highlights, but I don't think it matters too much. And then I'm going to go to the colour. Now if I go saturation, that's kind of overkill, but I'll boost the vibrance, I think, something like that. And now when we look at this, I think, as opposed to that, I think what's happened is it now looks even more like a toy town. It looks like a model village, okay? Because whenever you see a model village, whenever somebody's sitting there with their paints, painting something, if you've ever painted little figures that are this big, then you know trying to get really subtle little gradations doesn't work very well. So colours tend to be slightly less subtle. You don't get those little gradations. You tend to get blobs of colour, splotches of colour. Even if you're doing something like creating a bit of coloured moss and lichen for the roofs, you're going to end up probably with a slightly brighter yellow than you would have. So hopefully then that kind of helps. So that combination then of the best photo, you've got to have the subject that's going to look miniaturized in just that right little Goldilocks space, you know, where not too far back, not too far forward, but just right. Then you've also got to have the depth of blur squished enough so that it really emphasizes that idea that you're looking at something small and close up rather than something large and far away. And thirdly, just this little extra thing that really helps boost it is if you kind of boost the contrast and maybe the color a little bit, and that helps lifts it into that kind of toy model area. So hope that all makes sense. Thank you very much for sending that one in, April. It kind of reminds me of, you know, like I say, there's a bit I kind of missed out on the tilt shift with that as well. So April says, thank you for the help. The extra saturation does help. Excellent. I'm glad that's come across well. Right. Okay. Well, just a quick reminder then that if you find these podcasts useful, interesting, entertaining even, then buymeacoffee.com/Kim Ayres is one of the ways you can support these podcasts. And little reminder for anybody who's coming in late or just it won't stick. I'm probably going to have to mention this many times before it sticks for a lot of people. That's fine. It takes a lot of time to stick for me. Remind myself as much as anybody else. The new submissions email address. I think it looks a bit clumsy on here on the screen at the moment, so I might have to play around with that and change it. But however, I'm wanting to get across the fact, kimayrspodcast@gmail.com. This is the place now to send your submissions. Send your submissions for the challenges, send your submissions for feedback and critique. Remember to let me know when you're sending anything in for critique, to let me know a little bit about what your sticking point is, what you were trying to achieve with a photo, and if you can, send me an unedited version as well, because that gives me more options to play with the edits and explore other ways we may be able to help improve your photo. Yeah, and of course, meanwhile, don't forget subscribe, like the video. Yes, if you happen to be watching this, do click the like. It does help the algorithms and all the rest of it. So yes, like, subscribe, tell your friends, all the usual kind of bits and pieces. Right, okay, so second image we're going to move on to then is Nicola. So Nicola sent in, no, not that one, that one, yes. So we've got this warm winter, well, warm sunset, cool winter. You've got this, got ice crystals, frost crystals. So sunrise or sunset, using kind of close up and with a little bit of lens flare there. And Nicola says, "Hi Kim, attaches a photo I would like feedback on, please. It was a quick shot. It was bitterly cold at the time and I couldn't feel my fingers very well." I know that one. "I like the way the sun was coming up in the background with the tree detail hanging in the foreground, plus the highlighted delicate cobweb." And you're right, that little line of cobweb there just really adds a little bit of icing on the cake, isn't it? She said, "I've attached the original, and the original then is, no, not that one, this one, right. Okay, so we can see then that Nicola's been doing a bit of editing to bring out bits of detail and warm the colours up, and also to add the lens flare. So Nicola then goes on to say, "I've attached the original and the edited version, which has curves adjusted, warmed up, maybe too much, and a small lens flare added. I'm never actually sure about lens flares and their ability to look authentic, so maybe you could provide some guidance on this." Oh, Meg's joined us, says, "Hello everyone, sorry for being late." Okay, so what we're talking, so there's a couple of different things that we're talking about here. First of all, yes, it's a lovely photo. I like it. It does have that, you know, warm sunrise kind of the glows, the reds and what have you, but the cool crispness of the ice crystals, the frost. The lens flare then adds a little bit of extra texture. But what Nicola's not totally sure about is, well, does it work? When to use it? Is it effective? How it's working? All this kind of stuff that's going on. So there's two different aspects here. Because she's mentioned that, she's also said, has she warmed it up too much? And there's different ways you can go about it. So there's essentially two different things I'm going to talk about. One is sort of, in a way, colour grading, in a way, sort of the way you play with colours, so you can play with colours. And the other then is about the notion of the lens flare itself. So I think what I will do is sorry, keep hitting the wrong one. What I will do is I will start with the notion of the editing and the colour grading side of it. Okay, so what we can see here is in the unedited version, it doesn't have the same kind of deep warmth. But this is very common. I do this all the time. We take the photo, then we bring it into Photoshop, and this is the point of editing. What are we trying to do with the editing? We're trying to emphasize a particular narrative. Now, I'll duplicate this layer, and let's just take this into Camera Raw and play around a bit. So I can hit auto. If I hit auto, you can see that it's automatically, what's it doing here? If I look here, it's dragged the highlights down, it's boosted the shadows up, opened the exposure up a little bit, and we're starting to get something that looks a little bit more like Nicola's picture. Now, what I could do, Nicola, I think she maybe dragged up the shadows a little bit more detail into the little kind of catkin things. But you're also got to be careful here because we're then losing bits of colour down here. Now, what you can also do then is if we go to colour, we can move it to the left, boost it. Now it looks like very much a summer's day, or we can go to the blues and make it very cool. Okay. Or the other thing we could do here, if I go to color, not color grading, that's not what I want. Effects, where's the color? No, color mixer. Yes, color mixer I want. What we could do here is I can take the yellows and I can move them over towards the reds a little bit, make everything slightly reddish, or I can do the orange. Yeah, I think it looks a bit more like that. We can take the oranges, well, right into a kind of quite a vivid, horrible magenta. But a little nudge, just like that, warms them up a little bit like that. Now, what we could do at this point is, and what I think, which is probably also done here, is let's add a bit of vignette as well, kind of draw the corners in, something like this. So we've gone to this, which isn't a million miles away from where Nicola started. But another option here as well, if I duplicate that layer again, and then go back into Camera Raw, now we've got the warms. If I take the color and then I push it over into the cool blues, something like that. Now, on its own, those warm reds have sort of become just a little bit kind of pinky purple, which don't quite work as well. But I'm gonna take those cool blues there. Now I come back here and I'm going to put a mask there. And then what we could do, if we wanted, is actually allow the cool blues to stay around the edge and just sort of paint. I'll tell you what, let's put that about 50% or something, so I've got a little bit more control. Paint the warmth back in just around here, make it slightly stronger in this part here, and allow it to fade out into the blues as well. Now, maybe overall I've gone slightly too far with this, but the point here is that you don't necessarily have to have the whole picture shifted over into the yellows or the warmer colours. What you can do is you can shift it. Oh, Susan's joined us, has she? Yes, I missed that from... Did I miss that one earlier? Sorry, Susan. Didn't mean to miss you out there. So it's hi from a fairly grey, damp Kakubri, feeling chilly too. I just realised you were saying hi to Meg now. Sorry, anyway, distracted. Let's come back here. So the point that I'm trying to make here is that you can take something like this and that you can actually, by doing a sort of blue shift on one layer and a yellow shift on another layer, and then masking, that allows you to localize where you want the warmth and then maybe allow the coolness to sort of sit on the outer edges where the light isn't. So, and then but I want to show you something else I can do. If I duplicate all these onto another layer again here, and again, if you happen to have Photoshop, but there's lots of other ways you can do it. If I go to Camera Raw filter here, there's a little, now where am I? Am I just behind? Let's pull this over a little bit here. Make sure we've got symbols. So over here, there's a bunch of symbols on the right. This top symbol here is where all about your sliders. But if I go down to 1, 2, 3, 4, fifth one down, this here gives us color grading options. It's got a whole mass of preset color gradings. Now I've got some that I kind of default to. So cinematic style. So you see, if I go over CN1, that's changed it. If I go over to, just going to move, yep, CN2, shifts again, CN3, 4. And what we can see here is that all these are giving us quite a different mood and feel to them. And in essence, whether you want to go kind of green and orange, or you're wanting to go more kind of purple and blues, there's all sorts of different options to play around with. Then we've got futuristic styles, which some of those tend to be slightly more saturated. There's vintage styles, which tend to be slightly more muted. And actually you can take an idea, you can take something like that, say click OK, and so we go back to your original photo, then we go to our shift, then we go to our blue edges, then we can do something like this. And so the point being is that there's all sorts of different filters that you can go and apply anyway. So what we're doing when we are color grading the image. We are shifting the colours about from the original. The original didn't have those warm reds, nor does it have those cool blues. In fact, it's got almost a kind of coffee colour to it. But by bringing out the rich warms and by bringing in the cool blues, we are affecting the colour. The fact is, all I'm doing is pointing out that there's a whole bunch of presets sitting in Photoshop that you can go in and play around to your heart's content. Part of the problem very often actually tends to be option overload. There's so many that you can do with it. Okay, so I hope that's kind of making sense with the notion of the colours. Nick says, I love the warm and cool tones. Never thought about that, Kim. Okay, excellent. That's a good one. So the next thing that we're wondering about is the notion of lens flare. So if we go back to Nicola's original, what we see here is there's like a little loop of almost like a rainbow kind of little thing going on around in the picture itself. Now, the thing is it's not there in here. What Nicola has done is she's added it afterwards. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go off on a little bit, well, it's not a tangent because it is important to this, but it's that notion of, well, kind of what is lens flare? Why does it happen? So in essence, what's going on is lens flare happens when you take your camera and you're pointing it towards a light source. And what we've got is we've got a lens which is rounded. And so when the light hits it, it doesn't just go sort of straight through it like a flat window. It distorts it and it can catch little bits. And so because the lens is slightly rounded, just like on a magnifying glass, then there's more surface area for it to hit. And sometimes that light just gets distorted slightly and bends. And sometimes you get these little flares that kind of come out of it. And then depending on the lens that you've got, depending on the angle you're at the light of, that you've got the angle, then that flare can, sometimes it can actually interfere with the picture because the flare goes across the wrong part of the image and the bit that you're trying to focus on is now sort of being washed out or hidden by the flare. Or sometimes it can feel like it's adding an extra level of authentic texture of being there. So there are times when lens flare is just a bit of a pain and you end up having to try and Photoshop out. And sometimes there's a bit whereby it's enhancing, and sometimes it might even be a case that you want to add a little bit in afterwards as well. So let me give you an example then of when lens flare happens relatively naturally. So you're shooting. So if I show you this picture here, so this was taken in the Sahara Desert in Morocco, sunrise, and basically I've got my wide angle lens on. I'm down in the sand dunes trying to capture these camels silhouetted against the rising sun. And so I'm shooting into the light. Now, this does mean blown highlights here. I'm not overly worried about that because you're kind of expecting the sun to be out here. The real aspects of this are we've got these camels silhouetted against the sun, and we've got the leading line of the curve of the dunes taking our eye up towards it. So I'm playing around with it. But the fact is, the light is hitting my lens. And what's happening here is we're getting several different effects here. There's almost like a rainbow effect going over here. We've also got a little bit of chromic aberration where the line edge has gone a little bit green. We've got this, like I said, we've got this kind of rainbow effect going on here. We've got these streaks of light coming here. And then we've got like a kind of little green blob here, a little purple circle there. In fact, there's even a little tiny pink blob here. And in essence, we're getting sunspots and streaks all over the place. Part of it is to do with the lens that I've got on. Part of it might even be to do with one or two dust spots or even sand spots or something on the lens, catching the light and sort of distorting slightly more as well. But in a way, without these streaks of light, the photo might not actually work quite as well. So there's something about the streaks which are kind of grabbing the attention. Oh, now Susan says, can't help but see the bent knee on the leading camel. Fabulous. Okay, now here's an interesting point. Yes. So this knee is bent. You'll notice this knee is bent. You'll notice, well, you can't see it bent, but you can see that it's moved forward and it is bent. And it's not bent. What it is it's tied. It's one of these things I discovered. I had no idea. When I first saw a camel hobbling along on 3 legs, I thought, oh my God, camel's broken its leg. Oh, I wonder if, and then I noticed, oh, is that camel broken its leg? No, hang on a sec. Not all the camels can have broken their legs. Turns out what it's about is it stops them running away. So this trick with your camels, there's no trees to tie them to. Okay, there might not even be a big rock to tie them to. You've just got sand. Now, if you're stuck in the middle of the desert, the last thing you want to do when you go for your sleep at night is to wake up and find your camels are gone, and that's it. You know, you'll just survive. So for as long as tribes people have used camels to go across the desert, or anybody's used camels to go across the desert, one of the things that they've done is at night time, they tie one of the legs up so that the best it can do is hobble. So even if you have a really fantastic sleep all night and the camel's gone as far as it possibly can in 7 or 8 hours, it's not actually going to go very far, and you just get yourself on a bit of a rise on a dune and you should be able to spot it fairly easily. So yes, turns out they don't all break their legs every night, they just tie them up. So now that's a proper tangent. Where are we? April says, I like the desert picture with the camels. Thank you. Lisa says, how interesting. And Susan says, crikey, that's amazing. Now, all these things we never knew, because let's face it, how often do we need to know that amount of information in southwest Scotland, or that particular kind of information? And Nick says, I never knew that camel fact either. April says, sounds uncomfortable. Yeah, I'm sure it isn't very good. You know, if you had one leg tied up so that you could only hop during the night, it wouldn't be particularly comfortable. But it's obviously not killing them or anything else, and overall it solves a problem. But hey, I'm no animal rights specialist or activist, so I'm not going to comment necessarily on whether it counts as cruelty or not. Necessity, I think, is really what we're talking about here. John says that old-time cowboys used to hobble or tie their horses. Right, I guess it's the same kind of idea, yes. So back to then the notion of the lens flare. Because there is sun hitting a lens, a curved thing, then light is distorting and it's throwing particular streaks of light. I mean, I'm not totally, will this work? Let's just try. Right. So, I mean, if you take something like, you know, I've got a glass here, it's a round glass. And if I shine a light, let's see if I can do this. So I can get, now, can we get a shadow of light on the wall? Now you can see here, there's streaks. Okay. So it's not, I might be just too far away for this to really make much difference, but it's not just a case of, we're not just getting a straightforward shadow of the glass on the wall. The water and the bend of the glass is creating all sorts of sort of strange lines. So you might notice that. And what's happening then is, because the glass is round, the light is refracting around the place. So the same kind of thing then is happening on your lens. Now, sometimes this can really work to your advantage. I've fairly recently did a shoot. It was a sort of wedding, a kind of civil ceremony, but done like a wedding. It was just a very small couple getting married. Now, where am I going to go? Yeah, now, I've blurred their faces because they're private photos. But while we were sort of down on the beach and the ceremony was happening, all just in the little space next to the beach, we got this effect. And what I'm trying to draw your attention to is these kind of rainbow cut streaks running across. And that happened because just at the absolute angle I was at when I was going click, the light happened to be hitting the lens and it created this effect. Now, I would like to say that I did this on purpose. I didn't. At the time, I'm just going click, click, click. I'm moving around the place. Afterwards, when I come back to look at the photos, I noticed this one and 2 or 3 other ones have this kind of complete rainbow streak running across them. And actually it worked quite well. And the clients, it has to be said, absolutely loved the effect. because it feels almost like that kind of blessing of, you know, some sunbeams coming down from above. So in this case, that lens flare really kind of created an effect that the clients were really happy with. So what though if you have a photo that doesn't actually have that effect, but might be something that you'd want it to? So I'll tell you what I will do. I'll open up a photo that I took several years ago. So we have this one of my friend's daughter Amber on a pony in a bluebell wood. Now it was 2014, 2013, something like that I took this photo. And so basically with this shot, Amber had decided that she wanted a photo of herself bareback on the her white pony Daisy, not wearing any shoes. You've got this beautiful kind of picture of young innocence, the white, and the bluebell woods. And what I do remember about this particular year was in the springtime, it just rained incessantly. And you've only got about a 2 to 3 week window with bluebells from the time that they turn up to the time that they just all shriveled up. And I thought we were just never going to get it anyway. Fortunately, we got one evening where it dried, the sun came out, and we were able to leap out and go and take the shoot in the evening. Now, at the time I took this photo, I was quite pleased with it. When I look back at it now, it sort of lacks a certain level of depth, and it doesn't quite do it for me in the same way. But this is one of those things. Now, what I want to do is show you then how the idea of how you might use a lens flare or something. Now, the first thing I'm going to do now, what we see here in terms of communicating the narrative is we've got, you can see that there's backlight. Okay, so there is sunlight coming in, and it's catching the back of her hair. It's catching the edge of the mane, a little bit coming to the tail as well. But I think this is one of these things which would possibly benefit a little bit from that, for those who remember, the Orton effect, which is where you blur and you... So I'll just show you that first, just to kind of heighten it. So if I go to blur, go back to Gaussian blur, I'm going to blur it a little bit more, something like that. Click OK, and then I'm going to change the relationship between the blurred layer and the layer below by going from normal through to soft light. And what that's done is it's created everything just a little bit kind of soft and fuzzy, like you've sort of slightly through a Vaseline lens. Now it's a little bit overkill with that. I don't want it too much, so I'm going to drag that down and then just nudge it up. Now the process also increases the contrast a little bit, but I'm going to take that up to something that's about sort of 38%, I think that is. So we can see it's just lifting it a little bit. And it's helping to bring out that notion that there is a warm sunshine somewhere. But we can't see where that warm sunshine is. Now this is where the next bit comes in. I'll duplicate that layer there, and here we go to filter, render, and then we have lens flare. Okay. And here we can see there's a little picture, and you see how well this is coming across. I could really do with enlarging just this little bit, but I haven't quite got it. It gives you a dot, and I can move this dot about. And as I move it about, you might see there's not just the dot. There's these other little bits, those little circles that came out, like we saw on the camel picture. It wasn't just the streaks. There was also the green dot and the red dot as well, and depending on where I place this, so then I could put it here, and I can change the brightness so it's barely a dot through to so bright that it blows out everything, and I'll take a guess it, and I've got a couple of different types. There's a 50 to 300 there's an idea of a 35mm prime, there's an idea of a 105mm prime, and there's a movie prime, which is just giving streaks all over the place. So I decided to pick on one of these. Maybe I'll go for the 35mm prime and click OK. Now, actually, it's not shown up very much. So I'm going to have to, it looked like it was much brighter on the picture. So I'm going to undo that. I'm going to go back to filter, render, lens flare, and I'm going to boost that brightness and see what happens now. No, I've realized what's wrong here. It's because this layer is only at 38%. Let's go back, let's copy all these and put them into one layer. The problem is I'm only doing a 38%. Okay, so let's try again. Render, lens flare. Right, that will be too bright now, so I will take that down to something like that and I'll click OK. And now we have this lens flare, except one of the problems we have is that the light is in completely the wrong place. It looks completely unnatural. If the light was really there, she would be lit up and the horse would be lit up on the right hand side, not on the left. It also does feel kind of somewhat overkill. So I'm going to undo that. I'm going to go back to filter, render, lens flare, and be a little bit more careful. Now actually, if we look at this picture, really the light is coming from over here. So if I take this over to here, and not too low, I need to kind of push it up so it's just right on the edge of the photo, about there. That's a better angle, okay? And then maybe I don't want it quite as loud as well. Maybe I'll just take it down a bit. What happens actually if I change it? Maybe, okay, let's change it to the 50 to 300 millimeter type. And now I click OK. And now we've got this. And it's maybe still a little bit too strong for what I want. Maybe I could take it down a touch, something like that. And now we've got this angle coming from this space over here. It's maybe starting to look a little bit more like a kind of an authentic one. However, having said that, these bits here feel very strong and just kind of over strong for the effect. Now it's not allowing, it's placing the lens flare directly onto the image rather than onto a separate layer. So I can't soften that a little bit, which is what I want. So I'm just going to undo that. And I'm going to do one more attempt where I go to it. And this is the point, is that you play around with it. I will go back to that 35mm prime. I'll take that and I will just nudge it down a little bit more. I think take that down to 100 and see what happens. And that's now starting to feel slightly better. This green is maybe a little bit too much for me. There's a bright green spot there as well. But at that point, what I can do, if I want, I can mask it. And then maybe take that down to a 46. I can just take out part of it. So there's a hint of it, but not all of it there. Okay. Another option, if I wanted, is I could create a separate layer. I could take kind of a yellow. Yeah, well, I suppose that was in the right color. And I could click paint on that. And then again, change that to something like screen. And then what I've done is I've just brightened up that corner to make it look a bit more like light coming through the trees as well. So these are all kind of different ways that you can play with it. You don't even have to have the lens flare. You can place a little glow up the top if you want. You can add in a bit of lens flare. You can play around with the different types. And that's all then if you're wanting to try and add one in. So I'm hoping then that all makes sense. So if we go back to Nicola's original photo here, then what we can see is she's taken and she's added in that lens flare thing. See a little green dot. And to be honest, I think as lens flares go, I think that one looks reasonably authentic. I think it's okay. The only thing for me is that, yes, the reds do feel just a bit oversaturated, and ultimately I would maybe play with the colour grading, maybe bring in those slightly cooler tones around it as well. So hope that all makes sense. Thank you very much for sending that one in, April. I think that, you know, not April, Nicola. Yeah, and well, thank you to April for sending in the tilt shift one, and thank you to Nicola for sending in this picture where we could talk about the notion of colour grading and lens flare as well. I hope that all kind of makes a little bit of sense of what's causing it. Sometimes you can use it to good effect. Sometimes it does actually just end up getting in the way. Nicola says, oh, that's very helpful, Kim. Thank you. Excellent. I'm glad it is. Right. Okay. So where are we at? next week. Yes. Now, next week, no, not that one. Next week, we have the Selective Colour Challenge. Okay, so next week then, so 2 weeks ago, back in episode 240, 265, 264, whichever one it was. Well, what are we on now? We're on it was 264, episode 264, 2 weeks back. We talked about selective colour. And so if you want to go back and remind yourselves, if you haven't done so already, go back, watch that one. There's loads of information about selective colour, how to make it work, what kind of things work, and very importantly, what kind of things don't work. And then because this was Robert's choice, because he won the Smug Points for October, it is that we've got the Selective Colour Challenge. So for next week, we have the Selective Colour Challenge. You need to send in your photos. Okay, go for it. Have fun with it. But do try and keep in mind as many of the points that I made as possible. I think it's worth playing with, even if it's one of these effects that you will never use again, just to sort of see how it works. And also so that because selective colour is one of these that crops up in a lot of these online competitions, competition sites like PhotoCrowd, ViewBug, Guru Shots and what have you, inevitably you get a selective colour or spot colour or colour splash, something like that every now and again. That understanding how the technique works, either to use yourself or in terms of actually judging some of the other photos if you're doing that as well. It's worth, so like I say, enter your images now. What I'm looking for is kimayerespodcast@gmail.com. That really is the most useful place that you can send me your images. Email your images to kimayerespodcast@gmail.com. And tell me a little bit about the photo as well. Tell me why you chose that, or what the photo is, or any funny little anecdotes that go with it. I always tend to feel that the stories that accompany the photos are just make the photos richer. So it doesn't have to. I'm not looking for great long massive paragraphs, but just a couple of sentences is always interesting. So yes, email me your images. So that's next week's Selective Colour Challenge. The week after that will be another feedback challenge. So it's up to you. Send me some images for feedback and we can see what we can do with that. Right. I think that's pretty much about it. If you haven't done so already, please like the video and subscribe, invite your friends. And if you really feeling generous, then you can buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/Kim Ayres as well. Right, I think that's pretty much about it. Lisa says, thank you very much for an informative, very informative and helpful. And April's also saying, have a great week. Right, so I think that basically brings us to an end. Thank you ever so much to April and Nicola for sending in the images. Thank you to the rest of you for turning up and commenting and letting me know you're here and giving me feedback as well. And I look forward to seeing you all next week. Take care. Bye-bye.